The puppy had been sitting between the baby and the living room wall for 9 days. Nobody looked at the wall. That was the mistake. Biscuit was 14 weeks old, a golden retriever puppy with the specific, slightly chaotic energy of a dog who has not yet learned that the world has rules. He chewed corners. He knocked things over. He tripped on his own ears. He was, in all practical respects, a puppy, which is why the behavior nobody noticed was hiding inside all the other behavior. 8-month-old Willa sat in her bouncy seat in the living room while her mother Petra worked from home. The bouncy seat was beside the south wall, near the baseboard. This was its established spot for 6 months. Good natural light within sightline of the kitchen. On a Tuesday, Biscuit began sitting between the bouncy seat and that wall. Not on the other side of Willa, not in front of her. Between her and the wall, a 14-week-old puppy wedging his soft body into a 12-inch gap between a baby and a baseboard. Petra moved him. He came back. She moved him again. He came back and sat with his nose pressed toward the baseboard, working the scent in short, deliberate pulls. She thought he smelled a mouse. Old houses had mice sometimes. She made a note to call an exterminator. Days passed. Biscuit maintained his position. He would be playing full puppy chaos, toy in mouth, full speed across the living room, and then he would stop, walk to the gap between the bouncy seat and the wall, and sit, nose to the baseboard, pulling the scent. On day 9, Petra's husband Rowan mentioned it to his father, who had owned dogs his whole life. His father said, "Move the bouncy seat somewhere else, and see what the puppy does." They moved the bouncy seat to the opposite wall. Biscuit walked to the south wall. He sat at the baseboard, not following the baby, following the wall. Rowan called the contractor the next morning. Subscribe now before the next sentence, because what the contractor found inside that wall and what the air quality test confirmed about what had been accumulating in that corner of the living room for an unknown period is what Petra cannot think about without sitting down. The contractor opened the south wall. Inside the cavity, behind the baseboard where Biscuit had been pressing his nose for 9 days, a slow natural gas micro-leak from a corroded connector on a gas line that ran through that section of the wall. The leak was small, below the threshold that would trigger a gas alarm at room level. It had been accumulating in the wall cavity. The air quality specialist, Damien Osei, who tested the space after opening, said, "A leak this size in a sealed cavity can produce concentrations inside the wall that are multiples of what you'd measure at room level. A dog's olfactory system is sensitive enough to detect natural gas compounds through drywall and baseboard at concentrations far below human perception." What the puppy was doing was locating a scent source he could not reach. He looked at the bouncy seat position. He said, "An infant at floor level, directly beside a baseboard above a gas accumulation point, that's the exposure position." He said, "This is why the puppy sat between the baby and the wall." Has a puppy or dog ever fixated on a specific wall, vent, or baseboard in a way that turned out to have a reason? Tell us in the comments. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. The connector was replaced. The wall was resealed. The bouncy seat went back to the south wall 2 weeks later. Biscuit walked over, sniffed the baseboard once, and walked away. He sat in the middle of the living room and looked at Petra with the satisfied expression of an animal whose job was finished. He was 14 weeks old. He had no training. He had only a nose that worked, and a gap he kept returning to until someone finally looked at what was behind it. Next, the golden retriever who refused to let the toddler into the kitchen every morning for a week, and the morning the family understood why.